This week, it's our big Nintendo 2024 recap, including our biggest surprises and disappointments of the year. Plus, we'll rank all the Nintendo handhelds. Toadstool Boardroom starts right now. Boardroom on! Hello and welcome to episode 116 of the Toadstool Boardroom for the week of December 4th, 2024. I'm Logan Plant, joined as always by Justin Corice.
What's up, Logan? For the first time today.
Or maybe the third. And Chris Shriver. Hey, Chris.
Wow, what's happening?
What's happening is we're listening to the new Toadstool Boardroom theme song. It's music to my ears. This is so exciting. We have to give an enormous thank you to Boardroom listener Chad Timblin, who reached out to Felix Sanchez, who you may know from Nintendo Life, who composed and arranged this entire Toadstool Boardroom theme song that's playing underneath us right now. So we're so grateful to both of them for just doing an awesome job on this. And Chad, just above and beyond, amazing that you did this for us. We're so grateful. And Justin, we love the song.
Oh, it's so good. It fits our vibe so perfectly, especially as somebody who likes old chiptunes. Amazing. Felix, incredible job. Chad, I can't thank you enough. That is so kind and generous of you to take the time and effort to go through that. You are awesome.
I don't know what we did to deserve listeners like this, quite honestly, but it's pretty amazing. I always wanted to have like a theme song to the show, and don't have the talent or ability or time to do that. So not only, the fact that it happened and, Chad had it happen for us, but that it was Felix that put it together, who I'm such a big fan of him and the guys over at Nintendo Life and the girls over at Nintendo Life. Yeah, I'm thrilled. I'm so happy that this is happening.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Chad. You rule. It's amazing. And Felix and I met at PAX West, and we played Mario Party together in the media lobby. And I was messaging him a bit after hearing the theme song and thanking him for it too. And Felix might show up in the boardroom sometime, which would be super fun. So awesome. We're really excited about it. And if you want to hear the song in full, it's also going to be our outro. So you'll hear it at the end of the episode when we're done yapping, and you don't have to hear us talking over it. You can just enjoy it in full because it's awesome, and we love it so much. We got to move on, though, because, guys, we have a packed show. It is our Nintendo 2024 year in review, because including this show, there's only 2 shows left in 2024. After next week, we're going to pack it up and take the rest of the holidays off and see you again in 2025. So this is the first half kind of our year in review, where we're going to talk about the events, the announcements, the messaging, the themes from Nintendo of 2024. Next week is all about the games. We'll go through the entire Nintendo publishing lineup, talk about our favorites, what hit, what missed, and then crown our favorite games of the year at the end of the show. Speaking of some housekeeping, be sure to send us your favorite Nintendo published game and your favorite third-party Switch game of 2024. Don't actually send us copies of the game. Send us your answers to those questions, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com, or on X/Blue Sky at ToadstoolBR on Twitter, Toadstool Boardroom on Blue Sky. So yeah, let us know and you can have a chance to be a part of the show. Let's get into it, guys. I have a list here of the notable events of 2024 in chronological order. This is a list that scared Chris Shriver because of how long it is. So let's get started right now. In February, the Sora amiibo finally wrapped up the Super Smash Bros. Line of amiibo that kicked off all the way back in 2014. And Chris, I didn't expect this to take 10 years to complete once this thing started.
Yeah, as soon as I pulled up this list, I actually couldn't believe that happened this year,
Yeah.
because it feels like we're so far removed from Smash, like just as a Nintendo Switch fan. Not that like I don't love Smash, but like we're not really talking about it anymore. It's not like they're really releasing content for it anymore. So the fact that, again, this late in the game, they still were like, okay, here's that very last one that for a long time we really weren't sure that we were actually ever going to get because of the licensing issues that are surrounding Disney's involvement and all that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it happened, which I think is super great. But yeah, can't believe that happened this year.
And Chris, you missed our last episode when we had Brian from All Things Nintendo on, and we talked a bunch about Amiibo, and you said that you were sad that you missed the big Amiibo conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I was devastated. Like Amiibo hunting was like a huge part of like my life, really. In that, like, what, 1 to 3 year span. Like I remember asking my boss eventually like got the hint that like I'm gonna do this whether he likes it or not. Like I had a very cool boss at the time. And I'd be like, listen, the NES pre-orders are about to drop. I have to go to GameStop in the next hour. I don't care that I already took lunch. And he would let me do it.
Mhm.
Just some of the crazy, things that I had to go through to eventually get all of them. Like I have the whole Smash line at this point.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
and I mean, it was a wild time.
Yeah, it was the end of an era to see specifically that line conclude, because that was always the
Yeah.
one there was the most fervor around and hype around and difficulty to get specifically because they kind of figured it out by some of the later waves. So yeah, that was, even if Amiibo continues, which it did, we got a couple more this year. That was certainly the end of an era. So yeah, that feels very long. 2024 felt really fast to me, but then when I see something like that, wow, that was a really long time ago. It feels
Yeah.
like that happened. This is another very Shriver coded event from this year, which is Nintendo went after the Yuzu Switch emulator, and it wasn't the only one that they went after this year. Chris, you were a little bit fired up about this at the time. How are you feeling about it like 10 months later?
I mean, I'm not happy about it still, but it's open source, right? People are still quietly working on these emulators, or at least their own branches of Yuzu, and Ryujinx was the other one that got taken down. Um, it stinks. I understand why Nintendo did it. But to somebody like me that wants to have like the best experience of playing a game like Tears of the Kingdom, um, if you don't want me playing it on an emulator, put out your new system then. Just do that.
Yeah, which was another big theme of the year that they didn't do that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. The Super Mario Brothers movie sequel was officially announced on Mario Day on March 10th. Mario Day was a Sunday this year, and Nintendo kind of went against the grain of what they usually do and had a big video presentation for Mario Day. We got release dates for Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door and Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and then they announced this partnership with Illumination is continuing, and there will be a Mario movie sequel. That's set to come out in April of 2026, so we're still a ways off from that one. But Justin, we'll go to you on this one. What do you think?
Uh, I love the way that Nintendo is leaning into the Mario Day memeness of it. I think it's a cute, fun nod. So often, again, using Yuzu as an example, they will like kind of distance themselves from stuff that they haven't created, that they haven't generated. They're very protective of the messaging and things like that. So the fact that they take this that was very much an internet meme and really build something off of it, I think is great. And I like the Mario movie, so I'm looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, I think that it's one of my predictions for next year, which I'm getting ahead of myself. We'll have a whole show for that, but we're going to see the trailer for this thing next year sometime in the fall at some point, before the big Christmas movies probably. And yeah, the first movie teased Yoshi at the end of it. I'm excited to see kind of what that looks like. I'm curious to see Donkey Kong's role in this movie, and if it will continue the year of Donkey Kong that a lot of people think that next year could end up being. So yeah, excited about that. Less exciting though for us, we held a bunch of game nights for Kid Icarus Uprising, Mario Kart 7, Super Smash Bros. For 3DS for the reason that the Nintendo Network was discontinued on 3DS and Wii U in March, so online play support for those systems was done. And yeah, it was super fun just to rally around those systems one more time and playing Kid Icarus Uprising with groups in our Discord. And then when I logged on to play Splatoon on Wii U, and people were just having these squid parties in the middle of maps. We weren't even fighting each other. We were just running around these maps for the last time as the servers went down. And then it became this thing of how long could you stay in the servers after they were closed, because they weren't admitting new people, but everyone that was still in could remain connected. And someone stayed connected on Mario Kart 7 for 6 months. It was only very recently that they got disconnected because their internet went out or something like that, or their power went out, and the last remaining person was disconnected from Nintendo Network. But yeah, it was another end of an era to see kind of this end, but it was time, and I don't have any issues with them shutting this down.
Did you make any last minute purchases?
That was last year. The shop was closed
Oh,
when I
that's true.
did
That's
spend
right.
like over $100 on the
Yeah, dude,
eShop on games I think I've opened zero of in the year since that happened.
just in case.
But just in case, yeah, just in case I ever want to play. What did I buy? Like, what's that Game Freak drill
Federation
game?
Force.
I did buy Federation Force. Yeah,
Yeah.
and Drill Dozer, is that what it's called? Why can't I think of the name of
Drill
this
Dozer
thing?
is a cool game.
Yeah, I bought that too on the GBA Virtual Console. So we mentioned Nintendo obviously didn't release or really talk that much about a new console this year, but they did mention the Switch successor a couple of times in their investors meetings. The first was just confirming that they'll show it off before the end of March 2025, and then later they confirmed backwards compatibility in some way. We don't know exactly what that's going to mean yet. Just a selection of Switch software will be playable on Switch 2. We'll see what that ends up meaning. But Justin, we only heard from them about this 2 times this year. How do you feel about their communication about it?
Well, honestly, they've mentioned the Switch successor a lot of times. Every tweet that's going out with a direct mentions the Switch successor
That is
to
true.
tell us there's not going to
Yeah.
be any information about the Switch successor.
Yes. They mentioned
Uh,
it 10 or 12 times. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Honestly, I get that some people are kind of mad about it. I'm fine with it. I understand why they had to talk about it because stakeholders, investors, one, ask about it, and two, do need to know about it because just from a financial responsibility standpoint, you do need to let your investors know if you have potential large amounts of revenue coming up. I think they've done the right thing by always telling us that they're not going to talk about it. I'm glad we're never waiting on bated breath or anything like that. It's going to be funny if they do a Nintendo Direct where they don't tell us what it's about, but they also don't include that tagline at some point. That'll be really funny.
Mhm.
Although, even though I do think they'll probably just tell us this is a Nintendo Direct about the Nintendo successor. But yeah,
Mhm.
so some people are upset by it. I don't mind.
Yeah, I just booked a vacation for early January. So if they reveal the Switch 2 the week of a Toadstool Asylum, oh man, that'll be a rough one to
Real
miss, but a
crazy in
fun
here.
one to listen
It's your
to.
worst
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah, I know. I was hesitant to even book it. I'm like, should I do this? But I can't just block off the entire year and not do anything waiting for this thing. Yeah, but Chris, we can hit this now. How do you feel about Nintendo's communication or lack thereof this year about Switch 2?
I mean, I don't even know if there's been a lack thereof. Like they've been very upfront, like Justin said, in terms of when they're not going to talk about it. And like to their credit, they were like, "You're going to hear about it by March 2025." Like we haven't hit that yet. So if April 1st hits and we don't hear about this thing, you can be darn tootin'. I'm going to be going up to Mr. Nintendo's house with pitchforks and torches and all
Mhm.
that Koopa shells. Um, I'm going to be pretty upset about it, but they for now they get to live.
This would be a hilarious Mario Day announcement for next year.
Oh yeah. Yeah, do it
Ooh,
then,
that's a very
Nintendo.
good
That
point.
works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still, and this isn't just me hoping that it doesn't happen when I'm gone. I think it's going to be February. I think that they got a game in January, they have a game in March, they don't have a game in February right now. So I feel like they're just keeping that open to talk about then. But we'll see. And this isn't our predictions episode, anyways. But I'm fine with it too. I think that expectations were set by us. And I mean, I'm part of the problem. I was predicting this was the year that it was going to be in our hands. I thought it would be out this year, and Nintendo stretched this thing out one more year, and that's fine because the Switch is doing really well. But I think it was just expectations on our part that it was finally, we were all ready for a successor, but Nintendo wasn't. But no, I think that it's better than communication from them has been in the past when people wanted a direct for months and they posed the flaming chibi robo because they had nothing else to say. And then NX 2016 was much crazier than this year in the lead up to NX because they didn't say attached to everything, hey, we're not talking about NX here. They didn't do that. And maybe they learned from just how out of hand that got and did it that way this time. So yeah, I thought it was fine. And I want to hear more about it, but I'm also like, okay, waiting a few more months. I didn't think it had to happen this year. Next bullet point is that Nintendo acquires port studio Shiver Entertainment, so presumably to make third-party ports for Nintendo Switch. So it's rare to see Nintendo make an acquisition, so I thought that one was worth tossing in there. And then we only had one Nintendo Direct this year that was a traditional full-length mainline, if you will, Nintendo Direct presentation, and that was the one in June. We got Zelda, we got Mario and Luigi, we got Mario Party. But I think the biggest headline out of that thing was we got a re-reveal of Metroid Prime 4 with a subtitle of Beyond and a release window of 2025. So finally, Justin, after 7 years waiting for this thing, we finally saw a little bit more.
Imagine how good it must be after 7 years of consistent, linear, nonstop development.
Yeah, yes, it's ready to go.
Completely
Yeah, so
uninterrupted.
Yeah, it's been what, almost, that was 2019, so it has been almost 6 years of development on this thing, which is kind of crazy. But I'm so psyched for this thing. I think it's just going to be really, really great when it comes out. And I thought that footage looked really good. I think there
I
were
thought it
some
looked
mixed
awesome.
receptions. Yeah, yeah. What'd you like about it?
I The effects, like you saw lots of cool explosions, things like that, that look spectacular. The world looked dense and colorful and interesting. I don't know exactly what the world is, but the flora and fauna looked a little different from what we've seen in the past. So it looks like it's got a really good chance to capture that sense of like mystery and danger that to me is like in the DNA of the Metroid series. I'm extremely optimistic about this one.
Yeah, Chris, how about you?
I think it's a really good it's good sci-fi. Like it looks like
Good
really good
sci-fi.
sci-fi. I
Hmm.
think, and we've talked about it before, but there are people that were from Retro that eventually went on to work on Halo 4, and I think that game does a really good job of like just the way that its vistas are designed, and the way the visor looks when you're playing that game. Because I think they learned a lot from the first three Metroid Prime games, and I think this is a continuation of kind of how
Yeah.
that game even feels like. Not, I don't know if those are the same. If they went back to Retro or what, if they're like, wow, they're ping ponging ideas back and forth. Um, but no, I think just the whole style of how those games feel. Like there isn't any other first person shooter that's really out there in like the sci-fi genre that kind of feels like this, other than maybe Halo.
Mhm.
And Halo has kind of been
It's a totally different
for a
kind of
while.
game. I just hope
Yeah.
they go
Yeah.
bonkers on the visor effects. I love that stuff.
Yeah, it really is immersive.
Yeah, and Metroid Prime Remastered looks so amazing that if this just looks as good as this, which it at least looks like it does, but with some more complicated effects, there's ships in the far background in this Metroid Prime 4 trailer that are firing these giant lasers, and it does remind me of Halo in a really, really good way. And that's something they probably wouldn't have really tried to pull off on the GameCube. And so it looks like Prime Remastered, but with effects and cinematics that they wouldn't have attempted back then. And yeah, it looks amazing. I think this looks like best case scenario from what we've seen so far. So I'm super excited about that. It's a Switch 1 game. We'll see if it's cross gen. I'm still out on that, but a lot of people seem to be in on it. But I cannot wait to play this next year. And they also just updated the Metroid website with Prime 4 Beyond, saying it's coming in 2025. So one, it's cool that Metroid has a website. That's still kind of unbelievable to me that it's gotten that far. But yeah, this is a part of it too now. This is just a fun little thing I threw in here. The Lego partnerships are continuing with two really great sets: the Lego Zelda Great Deku Tree, and then the Super Mario World Mario riding Yoshi's back. The pixel art with the tongue crank. That's cool to see them making more sets that are more aimed at adult Nintendo fans instead of the Animal Crossing sets and the Mario Kart sets and stuff like that we've been getting. So really like to see that stuff continue. One of my favorite parts of the year was the Splatoon 3 Grand Festival, which was just back in September, Nintendo's big finale for Splatoon 3, which I raved about on this show on how great I think they did at handling that event in a very Fortnite like style. That was just awesome and just reinvigorated my Splatoon fandom, and I can't wait to see what they do with Splatoon 4. So
It's
that was
Logan's
just
Coachella.
incredible. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was at that music festival all night. Yeah, until the sun came up, which it literally did. That's how cool this thing was. Yeah. One of my bigger disappointments of the year, maybe it's my biggest one. We'll see when we get to that segment. The Nintendo Museum was revealed and opened in Kyoto. So Justin couldn't get in on the lottery when he went
Right.
there. Hopefully, we can get a boardroom member over there at some point. But Chris, a few months later, how are you feeling about this museum?
I'm pretty lukewarm on it. I really only want to
Yeah.
go there so I can get a pillow. It's like and a Virtual Boy mug
Yes.
and T-shirt. Like that is my
Yes.
primary objective. My cousin is in Japan right now. I messaged her. We have friends coming home from Japan. I'm like, "Are you going?" Like anyone that I know that is going in or out of that country and around my tri-state area, like that is the prime objective. Yeah, but I mean otherwise like it my house is a Nintendo museum, or at least my basement will be when it's eventually finished when I'm like 50.
Hmm.
Like I don't know what they're gonna show me that I haven't already seen or don't already have. When they
Yeah.
start getting to the point where they're showing off like those prototypes of like the dolphin and stuff like that, like I'm in. That's when I would want to go. But for now, um, I don't think there's enough there for me to warrant like making a special voyage.
Which is disappointing. It should be one of the biggest draws for a trip over there, and it's just not. It's like, oh well, while I'm there, I'll go stop by because why not? I'm only in Japan like this time. You got to go, but it's not a wow. I got to plan a trip to go see this thing and do a bunch of other stuff, and Yeah, like Justin, how disappointed were you that you didn't get to go see this thing?
I mean, I was disappointed that I didn't get to go, but I also didn't think I had a high likelihood of getting to go. So
Yeah.
it's like, again, it's a lottery,
Yeah.
so there's a very small chance I'm gonna get picked, and if I did, it would be cool, and I wasn't, and it's fine. Especially, I will say, when I was there for TGS, I did meet some other media friends who did go, and I sort of learned then kind of what the full scope is of it and how, especially if you're there and you're not waiting in line the whole time, it's actually a pretty fast experience. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, my hope for it is that we see approach similar to what we've seen in other things that they've done, like their music products and even their theme parks, where it expands over time and becomes that thing that we want it to be. For now,
Yeah.
like I'm exactly one of those people where if the next time I'm in Japan, I'm definitely going to try and see it. I'm not going to take a trip to Japan specifically to see it.
Right.
Yeah. Which is it's just a bummer. It's just a bummer that and I there were some comments about this on one episode. I think it was of NBC that I talked about this, and people saying, "Oh, it's a cultural difference that Nintendo doesn't want to highlight its individual creators." And that may or may not be true. I honestly don't know enough about that to say either way. But even if that's the case, there's so much you could have done beyond just honoring creators and individual people, like the behind the scenes stuff, like concept art that's never been released, like the prototypes that Chris mentioned. That yes, eventually they're going to display, but they're not right now. And it's really just the worst case scenario of what a Nintendo museum could be. It's a gallery of box art, and that is so lame. It's just, and the history of an evolution of the question block. That's just, it's not interesting to me. Oh, in Super Mario World, it looked like this, and then in New Super Mario Brothers, it was a slightly different shade of yellow. Cool. That's not what I
Like
want to
this is
see in a
all
Nintendo
it's all
museum.
stuff that could be on a website. I
Yeah,
think
Honestly,
that's
it
what
totally.
it comes
it,
down
it
to.
sounds like a lesser experience than what Nintendo Live was.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that thing was amazing. It had the wall of the Pokemon
A
timeline
lot of
and
those
all this
same
stuff,
museum
and then
things and really cool props on display, and the
yes.
musical performances and the cool sets like the retro
Hmm.
living room and the but I forget what the contest was called that you dominated in.
Yeah.
Um, like
Yeah.
it was like that was spectacular.
It was. It's a shame that what happened to the most recent one. I hope that they did
I'll
another
bring
one
it back.
in Sydney, I think. So they should bring them back. I think that they'll keep doing them because yeah, that's still one of the cooler things I've
Very
ever
cool.
done related to Nintendo. That event ruled. Okay, so the when I was putting this list together, guys, I it just made me really realize how much Nintendo's kind of been on one the last few months, just with these next
They've been
four bullet
wild.
points. They're unhinged. It's just end of generation, throw everything you have at the wall, and it's crazy. And the one that kicks this off is Nintendo Sound Clock Alarmo is released. Yeah, that was one of the more fun episodes we did, was just talking about this alarm clock. It's crazy. None of us have one still at this point. I'm still thinking I might end up with one at some point, and
If
mostly because
they
I
go
just
on
think
sale.
the Iwata connection's so cool. It's amazing, and I love that is it has his DNA all over it. I think that's amazing. But Justin, they made an alarm clock. What the heck?
I love it. Mad toy makers. At the end of the day, that
Yes.
is who they are. That has never changed, and I hope it never does.
And something that we may not always remember, but I remember right now, and it's worth putting in this year in recap, is that there were all these rumors about Nintendo Switch hardware reveals in October, and then it was this thing. And that's just
And we
great.
got
That
it.
is
We
just
got
the
a hardware reveal.
we did. Yeah, it happened. Chris, Alarmo, any thoughts?
I'm just waiting for a good somebody got Doom running on it.
Oh
What
yeah.
else can we do? No, and
Yeah.
and now, and I said it before, but they really need to incorporate the Nintendo Music app into it. Like that's such a missed
Yes.
opportunity.
Yes. Which is, I'll just jump to that now. That's one of these next four bullet points is Nintendo Music is released for Switch Online members. And then they just continue to update it with new content and new games. And then I saw people talking on social media today. They just added Splatoon 2 to this thing. But apparently there's 5 tracks you can only find by searching for them. They're not listed under the complete game soundtrack in there. There's 5 hidden. Why is it like that? This thing is so weird, and that's just an even weirder part of it.
Is that like a database error or is that an Easter egg? Do we know what they're
I
going for
think
here?
that screams database error to me. That
Yeah.
that seems like somebody did not update metadata in a way that they were supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, but I've used this app from time to time just working from home. I'll throw on the Ocarina of Time soundtrack. I'm still waiting for the Tears of the Kingdom one, but Chris, you work from home. Have you used Nintendo Music at all?
No, I actually just put in a
Okay.
request today to my work to allow AirPlay from an iPad to my work computer, um, because I want to be able to I want to be able to listen to it on
Yeah.
my speakers or through my headphones.
Hmm.
And I just got an iPad, and I was like, oh, I should probably see if they'll do that
Did you
in the
have to
most
put in a
extra way
reason why?
possible. I did. I just said for a music app that I use,
They
but I know
know.
like
They all
either
know what it is.
tomorrow or the day after, someone's gonna reach out and be like, "What are you trying? Is it Spotify?" And I'm gonna be like,
They'll be like, dude, you know Spotify has a desktop app, right? What are you doing? Yeah. Nintendo Music needs that desktop app. But yeah, just another wild thing. And then another one that I feel like the conversation died around faster than I expected it to was the Nintendo Switch Online playtest that we all got into. We're still sworn to
uh,
secrecy on the details of, but it leaked and we talked about that on the show. And I just feel like what I've seen from people, this is such a crazy thing that I feel like died really, really fast. Just people
of course it
theorizing and talking
died.
about it.
We're not allowed to talk about it.
Well, we're not, but that's such a small amount of people.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
like people that have talked about it have gotten blocked on Twitter, and like I think people
Yes.
just started giving up.
Yeah. They won. Nintendo shut it down.
Yeah,
They,
Nintendo won.
yeah. Good job, guys. But yeah, so we're still waiting to see what that thing turns out to be. But this was all within the same month that they drop a music streaming service, an alarm clock, and then this weird beta
it
test
was
thing
a
they've never done
weird time
before.
to have a Nintendo podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. And in a time where we were all just waiting for Switch 2 stuff, they gave us so much to talk about this year. I would not say it was a quiet year. It was a little bit on the software front for some reasons. There weren't the heavy hitters of last year when we had Wonder and Tears of the Kingdom and Pikmin 4, but there was some good stuff. And then just outside of just software, they gave us a lot of weird things to talk about that was fun, including Masahiro Sakurai ending his YouTube channel and revealing that he recorded it all years ago and has been developing a game since 2022. There's another one for you. That's insane. And that also was just in a row
Things.
with these other three things. Yeah, I can't wait to see what it is. Do you guys think we see it next year?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
No.
Chris?
It.
Okay.
If I remember right, when we were doing the math when this first came up, the numbers worked out right to I think a pretty standard development cycle, and so that's
Mhm.
kind of what I'm going off of.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to see it.
I could see it teased, but
Mhm.
like I don't think you'll get it. It won't be out next year. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
think.
Yeah.
I could see it 2026 being out at the
I agree.
earliest.
Yeah. When I said see it, I mean, do we think it gets revealed? Because
Oh, got it.
Nintendo generally only reveals stuff now within a year of it coming out. There's very few exceptions to that rule. I think Zelda will always be an exception to that rule. They'll reveal a Zelda early. But I think another exception to that rule is a console reveal event. They will show stuff that is further out just to drum up hype for this thing. So I could see a Sakurai game being a part of a Nintendo Switch 2 big blowout Nintendo Direct just to say, hey, there's a Sakurai game coming to this thing. It's not now, but eventually they could easily do that. So I think we'll see it. But yeah, that's crazy. I hope it's Smash Brothers. I've been actually getting really back into Ultimate, and the more I've been playing it, the more I've thought I'd like him to do one more. I want to see what he would do with another crack at this thing. So
I hope he's
I kind of
developing
hope it's
Alarmo
Smash Brothers.
software.
Yeah, he's developing the Nintendo Music desktop app. That's what's coming
Excellent.
next
Yep.
from Masahiro Sakurai. And then last one I have here is the Donkey Kong Country expansion opens at Super Nintendo World in Japan. We just talked about that a bunch, so we won't harp on it too long. But those were all the notable events, non-game wise, that happened from Nintendo in 2024. So let's hit some of the big themes. We already talked about no Switch 2 reveal, but there were a ton of rumors about this thing. I feel like every week there was a rumor. I thought, should we discuss this on the show? Should we skip it? 9 times out of 10, we skip it. We talked about a few, but I got sick of the rumors really fast. They started in January, and Chris, they kind of never let up.
Yeah, I feel like the ones that I tend to really care about at this point are the ones where like we're in leak season at this point. We had the supposed motherboard leak. None of the components were on it, but like what the actual board looked like.
Yeah.
There was one this week about the Joy-Con and like cases that are showing up on AliExpress. The name supposedly being Switch 2. And those are fine, but at the same time, it's also like anybody could make that and anybody could put that on
Yes.
AliExpress. And like it's not compelling enough to be like, oh my God, did you guys see? Like
Mhm.
until it's like, hey, this guy in a factory booted up Metroid 4. Like, I kind
Mhm.
of don't care at this point. I feel like we're so close. Like, between the holidays and we're a quarter out from the end of March. Like, we're gonna know soon enough at this point. I would hope. I don't think they're gonna back down on their word. Like,
Yeah.
we've waited this long, we might as well just keep waiting.
And I did feel like there was a and the software lineup's not as strong as years past, but there were a lot of Nintendo games this year, and I feel like more people were talking about the Switch 2 this year than the games Nintendo was actually putting out. That's kind of the point we're at for this thing. And we see it too in comment sections and stuff. People say, "Oh, I'm kind of just out on Nintendo until the Switch 2 reveal. I'm done with the Switch. I'm done with 30 frames a second. I'm done with games that don't perform well." And I get that. I don't think it will harm them, but I do think this year was just 1 year too many. And granted, they had a lot of games ready to put out, and there's not a drought like we saw with the Wii U and 3DS, but it just feels like we've all moved on before Nintendo has. And I think people are just ready for that next thing. And Justin, you've said as much on this show many times that you're just really ready for new hardware.
Oh, extremely. And I like new hardware, so that's always my mode anyway. But I mean,
Hmm.
it's a very very old cell phone is something you got to replace eventually, especially when it's your like primary game console. So bring it
Yes.
on.
Hmm. Yeah, and the rumors were just too much. And now there's these people saying it's going to be revealed in January by this leaker that apparently got stuff right about. I don't even remember what it was, but they got something else right. But remember that Waddle D Knows account that just tweeted a bunch of guesses on private, deleted the ones that were wrong. This was John Cartwright at Good Vibes Gaming, and then made the account public, and then everyone believed that he was this
Yep.
insider that knew all this stuff, and that was supposed to teach everyone to not believe this crap, but it didn't. It didn't teach anybody. I think everyone is still all on the hype train with this thing, so we'll see. But we
I
know
think
in the
people are
next
just
100
hungry.
days. What was that, Chris?
I think people are just hungry. Like,
Yeah.
so many people are just tired of waiting, and like like you said, like, I think it's to Nintendo's detriment. Like, they've let it go on for too long
Yeah. Yeah.
in the hopes for better holiday sales. And, like, I don't even think they're going to see them.
I don't know, where I'm hearing that the Black Friday stuff is doing extremely well. I'm hearing that the
What?
Switch is flying off the shelves on Black Friday. So yeah, this is the first real price drop for this thing. Walmart had the OLED, I think, for 275 or something like
Mhm.
that. So that is a pretty considerable cut over the 350 that it usually is. And yeah, a lot of people bought it. Yeah, so it's still doing well. But then did you guys see that Sony went and updated their PS2 numbers and said, "Oh, it's actually at 160 million. Psych, you're not that
Yeah.
close." Yeah, I thought that was fun. Okay, next theme from this year is that we only got one traditional direct, like we mentioned. That was the June one with Metroid and all that other stuff. But there were tons of other presentations. There was a tour of the Donkey Kong theme park. There were partner directs and indie showcases and all this stuff. And one of the other themes in the first half of the year, before Nintendo finally figured it out, was our good friend Puro, the leak account that leaked every Nintendo Direct. Every detail was published before the directs actually aired, and ahead of that big one with Echoes of Wisdom and Metroid Prime 4, they got it under control. They tracked this guy down and shut it down, and they've had a pretty tight lid on everything ever since this happened. But Chris, for a while, this was one of the most annoying things that was happening this year, was all this stuff getting out
This
soon.
might have been the most frustrated I've ever seen you, was just the existence of this account and what it was able to do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's good that they got to it when they did, because had they not and had it leaked, like, that was our biggest concern at the time, was like, if this
Hmm.
guy goes out there and leaks information about the console before Nintendo gets to, that's going to be a real shame. That, like,
Yeah.
that's how we all find out.
And it didn't happen, which is good.
No?
And yeah, and there were other leakers too that kind of all collapsed at the same time. So yeah, the first half of this year, leak culture was just rampant. And the surprises in that direct were huge. Zelda and
It's been
Mario
a lot
Party and
better.
all that stuff. And yeah, it's like, regardless of how those games turned out and what you think of all of them, that was an awesome show to watch and not have it be spoiled, especially something like Metroid or a new top-down Zelda. That would have been such a bummer to know about that going into it. So yeah, I'm glad that they put that one. They got that under control because that was a big issue for a lot of the year. That was one of the storylines of the year. Another storyline that also frustrates me is Nintendo has stopped telling us who is developing its games until the credits, and it's frustrating. And this is an ongoing
It
issue,
sucks.
and it totally sucks. Justin, talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information that you can glean from who the developer is. Like you've seen their back catalog, you know what they've worked on. You can get a sense for like things like scope, scale, what they're good at. Not to say that folks can't exceed expectations or pivot or do something really differently. And frankly, games are developed by people, and you know they've been frankly pretty poor about crediting in a lot of different ways. And this is probably one of the like easiest to point to examples of that. We we want to know who's making our games. We appreciate the people who are making our
Hmm.
games, and I wish they would make it easier. Es- Especially because a lot of the time you know, we end up finding out, oh yeah, it was this really really amazing studio. I wish I'd known that this entire time. This
Hmm.
would have been even more on my radar. And so I think in a lot of ways they shoot themselves in the foot by doing so.
Yeah, it feels like a lose lose because if it's a great studio, that's a easy win on the news cycle that day is to share who it is, and then everyone finds out, and then people are hyped about the game. And then if it's a studio that isn't up to snuff, you have better expectations going in about a game. And right now it's just neither. It's just a mystery, it's a roll of the dice, and it feels disingenuous to me. And it's just a frustrating problem that just continues because sometimes they tell us we know Retro Studios is making Metroid, and that's great that we know that. But then with something like Zelda, it took until it was out to say, oh yeah, Grezzo made this, by the way. This new top down Zelda, was made with a co developer, and we didn't tell you. And yeah, I'm sick of it. Chris, what do you make of all this?
I mean, there's a lot of aspects to look at. Like I think to Nintendo's point, like I think they want to be they almost it seems like they almost wanted to be like it was back in the old days where it was like, oh, it's a Nintendo game.
Hmm.
Like Yoshi's Cookie and Super Mario Brothers are both
Hmm.
Nintendo games. Like that's almost the flavor that this gives me. Um but then at the same time, I almost wonder if part of it is they don't want to let on how many third party studios that they're contracting, or how much work they're contracting out to third party studios.
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
like you said, Grezzo, who was it? The Dragon Ball Fighters folks did that.
Arc System Works
Yeah,
did
Arc
another
System
code
works.
recollection. Hmm.
Yeah, they did another code like that came out of nowhere. And if
Yeah.
you made me pick 100 development studios, like they never would have been on my radar for one of the like for
Yeah.
that being one of the games that they had worked on for Nintendo. Um, so I think they want to get into the business of like they want to get more games on the shelves that are Nintendo exclusive, but they also know that they don't have that much development power internally, and they have to outsource it. Um,
Hmm.
that's got to be part of it because the other side of it too is like, okay, if Arc System Works is working on another code recollection port whatever
Yeah.
for Nintendo instead of the next Dragon Ball Fighters or the next fighting game that they're generally known for, then I would think fans of that studio would be kind of annoyed that they're not working on that they're working on something that they're contractually obligated to work on.
Yeah, on that point though, on that game specifically, this is another one where it would have been a really good story to share because Sing was the original developer. They go out of business. A lot of those folks go to Arc System Works. They spend a year pitching Nintendo this thing, and Nintendo finally says, "Let's go." And that all came out after the game was out. And that's such
Right.
a cool story. And yeah, just nobody knows about it because most of the hype cycle like, for a game is leading up to release. And then the day after that thing is out, it's kind of on to the next thing. And I think that they just need to get better at kind of timing these things in the right moment. And they did. This started last year. This isn't new. They started it with Charles Martinet and how disastrous that whole transition
Oh
was,
God.
and
Yeah.
then the Super Mario RPG we didn't know either. So it's not new, but this was the first kind of full year of it. I feel like.
Well, and the
Yeah.
Charles Martinet thing is another example of them doing a poor job with crediting too. Like we couldn't find out
Yeah.
who was
Hmm.
voicing Mario until we got to the credits. Like they try and keep that
Yeah.
stuff secret, and it's such a bummer. And using Super Mario RPG as an example, right? We found out Shimomura was back doing the sound for that. That's huge. That's so
Yes.
exciting. Like that is a selling point for longtime fans. Like that builds the hype for it, and like that's you can like weaponize that. You can let people be excited about things beyond just the title and the trailers
Mm-hmm.
and stuff.
And then on that note, she didn't come back for Mario and Luigi Brothership, and that soundtrack wasn't very good. And Mario and Luigi soundtracks typically are. And then it was just a different composer, and we didn't know that until I downloaded the game and was playing it. And yeah, it's frustrating on all sides. But I'm talking too
The
much because this is also my biggest disappointment, which we're gonna get into.
Spoilers.
But Chris,
the
go
the
for it.
weird thing about it to me is like so they'll do all that, but then they'll do the like ask the developer series where they're like, hey,
Yes.
we have like the Bible of knowledge for how we worked on insert game here, like Super Mario Wonder, um,
Yeah.
and but we can't know who makes the game like before it comes out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just feels like they want. It seems like they want the product to speak for itself upon release, and then after the fact, it's like, okay, now you get to learn how the sausage gets made. But ahead of
Yes.
time, like, no, we're not going to talk about that. We want it to be about the product.
But then for Emio the Smiling Man, they have Sakamoto on camera in a 6-minute video. It's like, look at this thing I made. It's so inconsistent. And yeah, that's the way they should do it. That's super cool. That was the case where it's a storied developer who's been at Nintendo for decades who got to make this thing that they haven't made a new one for 30 years. Awesome. That should be the example, not the exception. And right now it feels the other way.
Yeah.
Last two notes here I want to say before we get into our biggest surprises and disappointments of the year. Games just didn't run that well this year on Nintendo Switch. And it is just, it's weird because, so obviously, well, that's one of the things I called out about Brothership was how poorly it ran. And then people would say in the comments, oh, but it's a 7-year-old system. You shouldn't expect games to run well. That feels the opposite of how these things usually go. Halo 4 came out the last year of the 360, and that thing still looks like an Xbox One game. That thing looks amazing, and I don't know what's happening. I don't know why well, I do know what's happening. Studios that aren't as talented as Nintendo are developing games for them. That's what's happening. But it's
Well,
frustrating that they're launching games that aren't optimized.
it's that, and it's a switch to Unreal 4.
Mm.
Like
That's what I
Tell
was
me
that.
more
gonna
about
say.
that.
Yeah. Like that engine is just more taxing and more. It's built for like modern PCs, and
Okay.
they're trying to run it on a mobile processing unit, and it's just not meant for that. And unfortunately, with them outsourcing a lot of this development to third parties, and this is the engine that most third parties are used to working with. Not only that, they're probably not going to give, unless you're like a Grezzo that like, yeah, you've proven yourself and we have this
Mm-hmm.
relationship. They're not going to give you the keys to the kingdom. Like, yeah, here's our entire development engine for Super Mario Odyssey or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
they're just not going to do that.
But that game doesn't run well either. Zelda, not
It
Mario
runs.
Odyssey. Mario Odyssey runs great.
I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Echoes
do
of
I have to
Wisdom
fight you right
doesn't
now?
run well either. And
Well, yeah,
that
it
was a
doesn't.
co-developed situation.
and
Justin?
to Chris's point, I think that has a lot to do with it. You know, Nintendo doesn't exist in a vacuum, and these third parties, especially, frequently develop software for other platforms, and they're frequently most people aren't developing in-house engines, right? You're using engines that are advancing over time, and like even like at rest doing nothing, the what is required for it does increase over time. Perfect example is like a single tab of Google Chrome consumes more memory than we had on the space shuttle that went to the moon. Like
Yeah.
that's how technology goes. And so over time, like even to accomplish the same stuff with engines that are updating and becoming more powerful over time, it just takes more cuz they're built for the ability to do more. And so
Mhm.
like that stuff is like it just compounds every single year. And I think if Nintendo started with hardware parity, I don't think it would have been an issue. But because they started in a position where they were focused less so on raw horsepower, and then it also lasted for an incredible amount of time, those two factors together, it makes perfect sense to me why by the end of the generation things aren't running well. It's not an excuse, frankly. Again, this to me is more evidence that we should have moved on a little bit sooner. But I'm definitely one of those people where like I don't think of myself as somebody who goes crazy over things like frame rates and things like that, but there's enough of it going on that it does drive me a little nuts. I mean,
Yeah.
Echoes of Wisdom, like the amount of chug in that is more than I can just like write off.
Yeah. It's just frustrating. I'm someone who, of the three of us, I care the least about all this stuff, for sure. And this is the year that broke me too. And I think that speaks to just where
Word
it's
on
at right
Rush.
now is that
Word on
I can
Rush.
put up with games not looking as good or not running as well. And that's always been, for a long time, not always, but for a long time, that's been how Nintendo games are, just because they are on less powerful hardware. But now they're just frankly not running well at all, even for the hardware that they're on. And I look at 2023 and Mario Wonder runs amazingly. That game is so beautiful. It looks gorgeous. It never drops a frame. There's only a few moments with some certain Wonder effects where you can even tell it's running on a Switch at all. Like that game looks amazing. Zelda, yes, it has some frame issues, but that game's way more ambitious than anything from this year. And then Pikmin 4, that game looks amazing too. It's these Nintendo games look great. And then this year, Princess Peach Showtime was a bummer. I wanted that to be like a Luigi's Mansion quality thing, and then it just kind of ran like crap. And then Brothership ran really bad, and Zelda, that's just a part of the 2D Zelda's legacy on Switch is that they didn't run well. And that sucks that that's one of the first bullet points you say about those two games. So it's a
It's
problem.
also like
And I'm
kind of
ready for the
hilarious.
next thing.
Like of all of the games to not run well, it's a 2D Zelda game.
Yeah.
Like you would
Come
think like
on.
that shouldn't be that hard, but
Yeah.
apparently it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a
It just
2D game made out of a bunch of 3D shapes.
Yeah,
yes.
that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah, top-down Zelda, as people so frequently like to correct people who
Do you
say
guys
2D
remember when they showed us how they did it before? And they have those like super weird angled legs on everything
Zelda.
to get like the right
Yeah.
angles on everything.
Yeah, that's from Awada Asks for A
Mhm.
Link Between Worlds. Yeah, that
Yep.
back when they used to really
Yep.
tell us everything about what they were doing.
I miss
Yeah,
that.
that is really cool. And it just makes me have more reverence for like the 3DS era where we had these smaller scope games that looked and ran great, like A Link Between Worlds. And these handheld series have just made the jump to Switch, and not all of them have done it very gracefully.
I think that brings up a really good point. The 3DS had so many games that had a run time of like 6 to 10 hours, and I was
Yes.
perfectly fine with paying full price for them. And I think thinking about it now, I don't know that there's a single first party Nintendo game that I've bought this year that I've actually finished because of a
Mhm.
performance issue or I didn't find it fun or like I'm on a Nintendo podcast and I'm saying that. And granted, I'm a very busy person and I talk about it all the time, but like what? Like how is that even happening?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, you know, I
Did
was
you finish Mario versus Donkey Kong?
No,
Okay.
I hated that game.
Okay. Yeah. I know you got close, even though you hated
it's
it.
the year of
Yeah.
Chris 8. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I just replayed the first Metal Gear Solid via the Metal Gear Solid collection, which is available on the Switch. Really
Nice.
cool collection, and like a single playthrough of that game is about 10 hours. Man, it felt great to have the experience be that dense and condensed, and always have that forward momentum, and then be done after a couple of nights. I love it.
Yeah.
I want more of that.
Super Mario RPG. Awesome. 15 hours to finish. That was a great remake last
out of
year.
a
I
week.
love
Easy.
the length of that. Yeah, and looked great too. But then people say, well, that's not worth $60. So then they overstuff something and then it's just bloated. And you don't want that. And it's something I miss. And we've talked about this before, and we'll talk about handhelds at the end of our show. But I just miss that middle tier Nintendo game because I feel like the $40 3DS title has been stretched into a $60 Switch title that doesn't look as good as those did, doesn't play as well as the home console counterparts, and some of them are just lost in this weird middle ground that kind of aren't serving either audience. And it's something to learn from, I think.
And then the ending
Like,
gets way too long, and then you give it a 5, then everybody gets mad at you.
Exactly. Yes, I wasn't going to say it by name, but that's a key example of a handheld series that's just yeah. And it's not the only one. It's really not the only one I feel this way about. I think that even the Fire Emblems, like I like the Switch
That's
ones.
what
I
I
think
was
they're
thinking
good
of.
games.
Honestly, like
Yeah.
I think the current iteration of the Fire Emblems wear out their welcome.
Yes, absolutely. And Three Houses, a lot of people love that game. That's a very beloved one. We're kind of on the side of that doesn't like it, but I think everyone agrees that game looks bad at a lot of points. It is muddy and ugly in a lot of its textures, and it's a home console version of a historically handheld series. The 3DS Fire Emblems with their pixel art look great. I don't like the 3D models top down of the units on the Switch ones. I just miss the pixel art. It's like just go back to that. But yeah, anyways, we're kind of getting off track here. But Chris has something else to say. Do it.
I was just about to say, remember how bad the Diamond and Pearl remakes looked?
I'm not even kidding you. I prefer that to have
Oh
something
my
like Sword
god!
to like Scarlet and Violet, hands
Well,
down.
Scarlet and Violet is like, we don't even talk about that game on this show because
Yeah.
it makes me so upset. So
No, Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Yeah, I agree they don't look good, but it's an attempt I like of just making a DS game on Switch, not
sure,
making it fancier. Like I liked that direction, and then people just hated the games. I'd never finished them, so I obviously wasn't that in love with it either. But yeah,
yeah.
I miss the smaller scope stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instead we have way too long Fire Emblem where everybody looks like shiny Crest toothpaste.
Yes. I haven't finished. I haven't finished Engage, but that's
Engage.
because it's the
Fine.
final chapters.
It's
I'm on
fine.
playing on hard, and the last few chapters are really hard. I did like it. I liked the gameplay, but the style just doesn't do it for me like the 3DS ones did. And speaking of Pokemon, though, Pokemon took a year off this year, and that's a big positive for me. It was much needed, and we still haven't even seen Legends EA. We don't know what that game looks like, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that they learned. I hope that Scarlet and Violet was the tipping point, and that they're not going to continue down this path. Remains to be seen, but yeah, I'm not gonna open the Shriver lid on this one because he will go off if I let him. So we're gonna move on because we're on this long enough. You can see it in his eyes.
I was just gonna say, play the TCG, play TCG. It's very good.
You've been playing it a lot. You said before the show.
I said while wearing my Slow Kings hoodie.
You're wearing a Slow King hoodie right now?
I am.
Show it off. Nice. Where's that from?
Somebody on Etsy makes them. It's like etched into
cool.
it, like stitched.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. No, TCG rules. It's
Yeah.
so good. It's really fun. That is our big recap.
I
though,
got
of
my
2024.
TGC shirt on. Tokyo
What
Game
is
Show.
that? Oh, nice. Okay.
But it's almost the same letters.
And it's almost the same letters.
Almost. Let's hit our biggest surprises and disappointments of Nintendo's 2024. This can be a game, a reaction to a game, something that happened, something that didn't happen, really whatever you want. Let's get the negative out of the way first and then turn to something more positive. Justin, your biggest disappointment from Nintendo this year?
My biggest disappointment from Nintendo is honestly the lack of the Switch 2. I didn't necessarily need it this year, but like the fact that we haven't seen it, I think is a bummer. I for all the reasons that we kind of just listed in kind of that last section, I do think the Switch is really ready to be done. It is gasping at breath. It is struggling to run the most basic software nowadays. And I really thought that like this was going to be and if the year was just a hype cycle for it, I'm cool with that. I love a hype cycle for a new console. I get super down with that. And we haven't had that. And again, I understand the reasons why. I get why that makes sense. But with how long it's been and with the fact that I'll be honest, the other two like competitors spent all year doing nothing or stepping on rakes, such a great year for them to put on their Toadstool Kingdom crown and remind people why they're the best in the business, and they haven't done it. And so even with like the software that we had a lot more software than frankly I thought we were going to get. The whole year just feels flat. I don't want to say it feels like a lost year because they did have some cool stuff, but it makes 2024 feel like the most utterly unremarkable and frankly forgettable year in Nintendo that I can remember for a very long time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this was more, I'm saving more of these thoughts for next week when we actually go through the whole software lineup piece by piece. But in 10 years, people will forget what happened this year because last year, we called last year their most successful year ever. And I stand by that. Last year was insane. And for so many reasons, the movie, the theme parks, the games, last year was incredible. It was a milestone year to be a Nintendo fan. And next year could be bigger. Next year could be 2017 again. And so 2024 just kind of falls in the middle of this weird place of this year that a generation went on too long, which they're known to do. They do this almost every time. So it's not necessarily bad, like you were saying, Justin, but it was just kind of a year about waiting around a little bit. And they gave us fun stuff like a clock to talk about, but this isn't a year where if I rank every year of the Switch generation, this one's lower. This is on the lower end of years.
I might
sure.
forget to include it entirely.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the worst year. I think that like 2020,
at least bad is memorable.
Yeah, that's at least that's true. Indifference, right? Yeah. Chris, how about you? What's your biggest disappointment?
I mean, to go off of that, like my only disappointment that I listed is just meh first party games. Like the whole year just kind of feels like a one big sigh, like one big exhale of like, all right, we're still doing it. Like we're still here. you know.
Hmm.
And I don't want to belabor it too much. Like I feel like we've spent a lot of time talking about it this episode, but
Yeah.
um it's like I said before, like there wasn't a single that I can recall, a single first party game that I played beginning to end. Um I
Can
can't
we
believe
please?
how
I know our listeners are thinking it. We got to throw the Mario Party asterisks out there. That game rules. Mario
that's
Party
probably the best thing
rules.
that came out this year.
That is the
Yeah.
best game they made this year, especially for something
Yeah.
Mhm.
original. Like,
Yes, Thousand Year Door's up there too, but yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. But otherwise, yeah. I mean, it's been kind of a shame. Like it in some ways it's been nice because it's since we've started this show, I've I've really like only been in the Nintendo well because of the amount of time that I have allotted to
Yeah.
play things.
Mhm.
And if anything, it's allowed me to dip back into like the Xbox ecosystem a little bit and like not even so much PlayStation. Like I maybe played like 2 hours of PlayStation this year. Um,
Mhm.
but like just getting back to like my roots of why I like video games and some of the games that like I grew up playing in that era um
Yeah.
when the Wii was out and stuff like that. So like that's been cool. um but I mean as far as like what is out there, um everything has felt like, to use Justin's analogy, I'm thinking about it all day, like the monkey's paw. It's like, yeah, you can have a Nintendo Switch Online app, but it only works on your phone and there's no desktop app. And it's just like every single thing that we can pick out here, I feel like there's something holding it back. um we got a
A
Princess
lot of
Peach
yes
game, but
buts.
yeah, we got a Princess Peach game, but it's for little kids and it runs like crap. And we got Luigi's Mansion, but the textures are kind of flat and
Yeah.
people take it or leave it with that game. Like you could just it goes on and on with what happened this year, and it's just
Mhm.
kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more positive on the lineup than you guys are, but I played every single one and I finished almost all of them. And I wouldn't say every one. I
Even
think, and
Endless
again, we'll talk
Ocean.
about this. Yeah,
I
oh boy.
forgot
We'll
that
talk
came
about
out.
the whole lineup next week, but Thousand Year Door ruled. That's an all-time classic. I was so happy to see back. And Chris, I hope you can just find the time to sit down and play that game at some point in the future.
I
Because
would
yeah,
like
that
to.
game,
I would like to.
that's a big one. I think like you're missing. Like you say, you haven't finished one. That one's I think is a lack of time to really sit down and
Yeah.
devote to it.
Yeah.
That game rules. And then Mario Party, amazing. But I agree with you guys for the most part that a lot of the lineup was this is the scraps, this is the leftovers. But we sound really negative this episode, and I want to say I fully understand it. Last year we got a ton of amazing stuff, like we talked about the big three I already mentioned of Wonder and Pikmin 4 and Tears of the Kingdom, and there was other stuff too, like F-Zero 99 was last year, and all this amazing stuff. And we're getting a new console next year, so every year can't be amazing, and that's okay.
Right.
Like we're not saying Nintendo sucked this year or they're doomed. No, this is just how the life cycle goes, and it's just the part of it we're at, and this is just a time capsule of how we felt in this moment. That's fine. And there's stuff I liked a lot that we'll talk about next week. But my biggest disappointment, I already kind of mentioned it, but I bundled it all together in one kind of phrase, which I'm just calling the lack of transparency. Just really just grated at me this year. And from not telling us who's making their stuff, to not crediting the musicians in the Nintendo Music app, to having nothing of value at the Nintendo Museum, it's just, and it's all their prerogative. It's all up to them how they communicate this stuff. They owe me nothing. They don't owe us any of this stuff.
I don't
But
know,
I just
Logan. I've
think
given
it's
them a lot of money.
that's true. But yeah, you've purchased a lot of products from them. That is true. But it's just frustrating that a Nintendo Museum, there's only going to be one of those. Like that's their shot, and maybe it can be this living, breathing thing like we've talked about. But right now, it's not, and I can only judge what it is right now. And right now, it's lame. And then we already talked to death about the developer stuff. That stuff's just really disappointing too. And not knowing who's making this stuff is a big bummer. And then the weird exceptions and the ask the developer, that stuff's all great, but it's not every time. And that is disappointing too. And then the music app, just not crediting the creator. Sure, that's up to them as well. It's fine, but it's like there's so many legendary composers. We talked about them on episode 100. They don't care to tell us that stuff. And it's just a disappointing pattern that I really have noticed this year more than any other. and it's just disappointing. And we already talked all these points to death, so we can move on. But that would be my biggest disappointment. I had a few to choose from. I almost picked Zelda for this. I'm not even gonna lie. I almost picked Echoes of Wisdom as my biggest disappointment,
I thought
just
about
because
it.
it's like
It's
if
coming
you're
around. I was in that too.
it's it's like if it's like if your star student just like turned in a paper that was like a C. And it's like, oh, it's not the worst paper I graded this year, but from them, really? Like that's how Echoes of Wisdom feels. So,
Yeah.
but
Man, like
I didn't end up picking it.
I hadn't really thought about. So we've talked a little bit about the crediting thing on the music app, and that is a bummer. I think that sucks. I hope they change it. But like as you were mentioning, it just occurred to me that like how great would it be to be able to do a Koji Kondo playlist, right? Because he's
Yes.
contributed to way more than just Zelda. And what if you could just listen to any music by him on there? We mentioned Yoko Shimomura, same thing. There's a lot
Mhm.
of great composers, and it would be so cool to just sort by stuff like that. Make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's people that are doing it. There's like a Twitter account that's like Nintendo Music crediting project that's going out and kind of making these playlists for you to customize yourself. So you can do that. But I don't think there's ever going to be an official solution, which again, it's fine. It's their decision. They have reasons for it, but it's just disappointing to me and I think a lot of people as just super fans of this stuff that yeah, just seeing it a more corporate side take over. And something like Alarmo coming out and them not even mentioning Iwata's name in it when he was around for the inception of this thing and I had to write an article on IGN about it to get people to talk about this thing. And it's like that's so special and cool and a big win they're leaving on the table and a cool way to honor one of their most beloved members of history who's not with us anymore. So that's it. I won't harp on it anymore because we've talked about it a ton this year. But that's my biggest disappointment. Let's read some of the fans' biggest disappointments here. The overwhelming one we asked in our Discord for biggest surprise and disappointment, and the overwhelming popular one was Justin's No Switch 2 reveal or release. Everyone's ready. The most hardcore of the hardcore are ready to move on. But we have a couple others as well. Rafe says, biggest disappointment. I didn't have any expectations going into the year, and I was okay with waiting on the Switch 2. So it was hard to be disappointed, but it's the lack of a new Donkey Kong game for the 10th year now. And then it was learning that a third party was working on a 3D DK game that was apparently canned. And yeah, Chris is raising the roof because he agrees with this one. And then we have Mario and Luigi Brothership is the biggest disappointment from Chad because he was looking forward to it as a dream video game sequel and was disappointed by the legitimate problems with Brothership. I'm right there with you, Chad. That one bummed me out too. Red Tea House says, while I still believe that microwaved leftover pizza is better than no pizza, I'm a bit miffed over the fact that it's the first year in many we've had Donkey Kong titles and it's two remakes that appear to be relatively lukewarm in reception. Yeah, jury's still out on HD, but it's not looking great. It's looking like a Luigi's Mansion 2 situation rather than like
Yeah.
a Thousand Year Door situation. And then he says, it feels like they're building towards something, but I have fear that my 2025 disappointment will also be Donkey Kong related. That's a tough place to
Possible.
be. Where you're already projecting that you're going to be bummed out about Donkey Kong next year too, but I'm with you. I hope it could be the year, but not sure. And then Lord Voldemort, who I didn't know was patrolling around in our Discord. Yeah. Lord Voldemort says, biggest disappointment is no mainline Pokemon games on NSO. No Game Boy, Game Boy Color, or GBA games, and the Nintendo Museum. Yep, agree with you there, Lord Voldemort. Jake's biggest disappointment, Echoes of Wisdom, and the apparent solidification of how both 3D and 2D Zelda games will play moving forward. Yes, Shriver had a legendary rant about that just 3 weeks ago. And then I think that's it for disappointments. We'll get to the fans' surprises in a bit, but great picks. Yeah, agree with all of those across the board. Let's turn the dial. Let's get positive here. Our biggest surprises from Nintendo's 2024, Justin.
It is that giant wave of non-gaming that we had near the end of the year through the fall.
Yeah.
A one-off cardboard you stick on your face for a year is pretty in keeping, but to drop the music on us and the Alarmo on us, and to talk about things like the museum, basically all of these non-gaming initiatives that arrived back to back to back.
Yeah.
I couldn't have predicted any one of them, and they kept dropping them one on top of the other. So I was in this like basically state of surprise, then I just stayed surprised because they keep hitting me with something new.
Mhm.
And I love it. Like even if I don't engage with these things necessarily, even if I don't buy an Alarmo, I love that it exists, and I love that they do stuff like that because there's always the chance that one of these things will be exactly the cool thing that I love. We've talked on the show before about how a lot of their non-gaming stuff, it's much bigger than it used to be with things like the Lego sets and movies and theme parks and all that stuff. And I love that that's continuing, but they're also doing like small, totally in-house, fully them controlled initiatives like this. And I hope they keep doing this weird stuff. I hope this isn't just filler because they're trying to do something during this time. And I hope that there's like a branch or an office in their headquarters where they just keep doing this and they keep working on it. And I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
Alarmo 2.0 comes out with a little ultra hand or a little arm to punch you in the face to wake you up in the morning if you sleep too long or something. I don't know. Keep it coming though.
Yeah, no, it is great to see this stuff. And it's funny because we did our episode of the weirdest things Nintendo has done this generation. And I think we did that before any of this stuff happened. Well, we just got a completely new top
Scrap that
five,
show.
essentially. Yeah, some of the weirdest things they did. I don't remember what we picked. It was Labo was for sure in there and a few other weird things like 3D All Stars. But yeah, that was before any of this stuff was revealed. And it was wild. And
They're
yeah,
like, oh,
the
we'll show
weird
you weird.
Nintendo is the best Nintendo. And I love to see it too. Chris, how about you?
Uh, not including all the things we just mentioned. The one that like really just jumps out to me because it I don't think anybody would have called it is them restocking almost every amiibo like out
Yes.
of nowhere for apparently no reason because we don't know if they're going to be using them in the next generation. Like I don't know why they're here. I'm glad they are because I got some of the ones that I missed the first time around, but like what are we supposed to do with them? Because
Yeah.
all of the games that apparently have amiibo support are now out as far as we know. And like I
Yeah.
guess it's to just keep playing those. I don't know.
Major games have been missing amiibo support, and then they keep reprinting amiibo. So I
Making
guess they
them?
just like
Yeah.
selling the figures. Yeah, which is fine. I mean, I like to see them alive, but yeah, some really rare ones that have been hard to find for years are
Like I
finally
finally
getting
got Boo.
reprinted. Yeah, that one was expensive for
Yeah.
a long time. That one's awesome.
Yeah. He's right here.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's an underrated surprise of the year.
Nice.
Boo glows in the dark, by the way, if you didn't know. That amiibo
Yes,
glows
he
in the dark,
does.
and it's awesome. Yeah, it's
Gotta
like
make sure you keep
the
looking at
stars.
him, otherwise he's gonna.
He's gonna get you.
He's gonna,
Yeah.
he's gonna come. For you. Yeah. My biggest surprise, I don't know, I bounced between a few things, and I think what I'm going to end up going with is just the Splatoon stuff as a whole this year. I think is the most surprised that I was by them, and not just the Grand Festival, which rocked, but how dang good that DLC was in February.
That DLC was
Side
really
Order
good.
ruled. It was so fun and bigger than I thought it was going to be. Added so much music and so many new enemy types, and yeah, it took them a this DLC took them a year longer to come out with than they thought it was going to, and you can see why. A lot went into that thing, and really cool powers, just an entirely new way to play Splatoon in this roguelike fashion. That was awesome. That was really cool and got me back into Splatoon for a good 2 months there when that came out. Then I was into Splatoon again for another month with the Grand Festival, and just how incredible that event was, and just what a send off to this era of Splatoon, and just amazing attention to detail and this new hub world that they built from scratch specifically for this event with new songs and new maps and all this amazing stuff. It's just, yeah, it just, we talked about it at the time. It just has cemented itself as a top shelf Nintendo series alongside stuff like Mario and Zelda. Splatoon is up there. It rules. And 3 is the best one. And that was just such a cool way for it to end. And in a year where we got very little content from Nintendo internally itself, this was the only thing they put out. They co-developer on a few things, and like MEO and Zelda, but this is the only thing they had their full exclusive stamp on, and it's one of the best things that Nintendo put out this year, and it's easy to see why. Just that level of polish and attention to detail and just quality that we expect from them. And yeah, it was awesome to see everything they did with Splatoon this year. And I hope Splatoon 4 is closer than we think because, yeah, they need to kick off the next generation with something like that. Cool. Should we hear the fans' surprises here? Let's see. We got Blee's biggest surprise is a tie between Alarmo and the entire concept of Echoes of Wisdom, playing as Zelda, and she's a summoner. Yeah, that was very surprising. Like, finally got to play as Zelda. Very cool. I don't remember if I said this on the show. I don't think I did, but I have been super nostalgic for Tears of the Kingdom lately, and I listened to the 2-part spoiler cast Justin and I did just to hear the stories I had forgotten from both of us. And we end the spoiler cast. I say, Justin, anything else you want to say? And Justin says, I was still hoping playable Zelda would show up at some point in this game. And then I said, don't hold your breath. And then a year later, we were playing an entirely new game of Zelda. So I thought that was funny. We don't always get it right. Rachel's biggest surprise was that the beloved Thousand Year Door was remade with so much love and care, and that they included trans Vivian. It shows Nintendo really does listen to fans, even if it takes a while. Yeah, awesome. That remake was pretty much perfect, and that was a really cool update that they made to that part of the story, too. Jake says the weird yet massively public yet confidential playtest. Yeah, absolutely. And all the F-Zero support. Very cool. And the Nintendo Music app. Great picks, Jake. And then Voldemort says, biggest surprise is Alarmo and the Nintendo Music app and the playtest. So yeah, just this deluge of weird stuff they did here in the final quarter of the year. Red Tea House has to say how impactful the final Splatfest was. Yeah, I agree. I was shocked by how much effort they put into this event and genuinely felt emotional from how well it celebrated the franchise up to this point. Chad says Nintendo Music, with runner-up surprises being Alarmo, Echoes of Wisdom, and the Nintendo Museum announcement. Rafe's biggest surprise was a new original 2D Zelda announced and released within 100 days. Yeah, isn't that the best? That's like what they did with Metroid Dread, and it was awesome. And then Tyler's biggest surprise matches Chris's, Nintendo's consistent output of Amiibo reprints. As a new collector and obsessor of Amiibo, I've been able to get so many Amiibo this year at regular price that sell secondhand for double or higher their original price. Honorable mention, Alarmo and the Music app. So there we go. A weird year. A weird year for Nintendo that we just recapped. We'll come back next week and we will talk about all of the games. Justin has to go in a bit. You got 5 more minutes, Justin, to answer a question here?
Oh yeah,
and we can wrap it.
I'm okay.
Okay, cool. So this question comes from not a robot. You can always send your questions toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com or find us in the Toadstool Boardroom Discord, where we have an EGADS emails channel that you can drop your questions there as well. And not a robot asks, don't know if this has ever been covered in the past, but what is your ranking of best Nintendo portable consoles? So only ranking the Switch off its functionality as a fully portable handheld. Tabletop mode is still reasonable here. Okay, what wins out? Power, library, portability, or nostalgia? So we're going to do a rapid fire ranking here of the Nintendo handhelds. We loop Game Boy and Game Boy Color together. Is that fair? Those are the same thing? Okay, then Game Boy Advance.
Oh
DS,
man, this is getting a lot more
3DS,
flat. Okay.
and Switch.
We're not
do you
doing
think, Chris?
revisions.
No, I think we're
Okay,
doing
that's
like,
that's where my head went. I thought this was a hardware ranking. You want
Oh,
like
I think
the
it's
platform.
like just like a generation ranking, like a software
Okay,
thing. Like,
okay.
Yeah, the console as a whole, everything it encompasses with its library, its hardware,
Got it.
all of that. Justin, you're not a big handheld guy, but do you have an answer for this?
Yeah, I'm an old nostalgic man who doesn't particularly care for a handheld. So for me, you can take the exact release order, and that is your rank from the top down. So the original Game Boy is #1 in my heart, and on down from there. Leading to
The Switch is the worst one.
I don't prefer. I play with the Switch in handheld mode maybe 3 to 5% of the time, and that's because
wow.
I can't play it docked, and I'm usually mad about it.
That's crazy to me. I mean, I know that's a thing with you, but that's just
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
I
that's
would
so
say, like,
different.
truthfully, probably 90% of my, probably even more of my, like, not dock Switch time is me in an airplane.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And are you mad about it there too? Or are you like, oh, I get to do
Oh
something?
yeah, man!
fun,
If I
it's
had
fun.
like a screen I could hook that little guy up to instead, 100% prefer that.
But it
My
is
hands are
just
cramping, and I'm trying not to. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What about tabletop mode on the plane? Sometimes planes have like that new like tablet holder that you can put the Switch in. It fits pretty well in that.
I have done that. Like I've done the thing
Nice.
where like I bring the Pro controller as well and I throw it into tabletop
Yeah,
mode,
mhm.
or I've even like
Yeah.
snapped off the 2 Joy-Cons so I could sit more comfortably and do it.
Mhm.
And so it's always a workaround, and it's never how I want to be doing it.
Yeah. So Game Boy / Game Boy Color #1, then GBA, then DS, and
GBA,
3DS, then Switch.
Yep. Right on the
Unhinged
list.
ranking to me, but I get
I
it.
love it.
Chris, what's your ranking?
What's funny is if I go back and use these things now, like I don't think that the order would stand, but like in my mind, if like in terms, if I'm looking at it like the enjoyment that I had at the time that I owned these consoles, I feel like 3DS, and I'm much like Justin. Most of my Switch time is in docked
Hmm.
mode, um, but 3DS is probably number one. I played a ridiculous amount, and like there was a ton of software on that.
Yeah.
Um, Probably 3DS, GBA, Switch, Game Boy, and DS.
Oh, DS last. That surprises me for you because of the age you would
I
have been when that was new.
There was a lot that I
Nintendogs
played,
hater.
and like I had, I hated Nintendo. No,
See?
like I had an R4 because of course I did. But like I also have like a pretty ridiculous DS collection. But like I think I always knew that that console was a little bit underpowered for like what it was doing. Like it's kind of like the N64 of, and I love the N64, but it's like the N64 of like portable handhelds, where it was like the first time they were really getting into 3D gaming. Like I thought it was super cool that you could play Mario 64 on it, but I never thought it felt good. Like I remember the
Hmm.
3DS getting an analog stick was a huge deal for me. And a lot of the touchscreen
Yeah.
controls I knew were gimmicky. Like even as a kid, I was like, I know what they're trying to do, but I don't like it. Um, like Metroid Prime Hunters and like all that kind of stuff. Like
Hmm.
I just remember not. It was a fun gimmick, but I knew it wasn't a good gameplay experience, even like as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm not as hot on the DS. It has great Pokemon games, but otherwise,
Yeah,
I don't know. There's and Ace Attorney was also that's where I played that for the first time.
Leighton.
So Leighton, yeah. Wait, actually, I do love the DS. What am I talking about? These are great series that we're mentioning right here. My ranking would be. It's super hard for me to include the Switch in this. I don't know. That's really, really hard for me to include. So I think I'll put it at number two. But it's my favorite console overall. But if it's exclusively a handheld, I think that would knock it down. Number one's the 3DS. I'm with Chris. The library is amazing, and it just hit that perfect level of quality of a Nintendo game, like we were talking about. It was advanced enough to feel big and like great experiences, but still condensed, like a Link Between Worlds or Kid Icarus Uprising, or there's a Smash Brothers on that thing that's really good. That's a great system, amazing library, great Fire Emblems, all of it. Two
I
would be
can't play it
Switch,
now.
Smash on 3DS, or the 3DS in general.
I can't play it at the 3DS in general. My hands are too big. I'm too old.
Yeah, yeah. You need a big grip to hold the XL. Yeah, they have those. They don't look good, but they're out there. Two would be Switch. Three would be probably DS. Actually, now that I think about it more, with the Ace Attorneys, the Laytons, the Pokemons. There's some good Kirby games on that thing. Yeah, there's some fun games on DS. It's a good library. Then GBA. After that, GBA just gets knocked down a little bit for me because there's no new Mario game on it, and I think that's really weird. There's not an original 2D Mario. Mario versus Donkey Kong is as close as you get, so that hurts it a little bit. But Pokemon, that's a Pokemon machine to me.
You
Chris is
get
looking
Mario
confused.
Pinball Land. You get
Okay, yeah,
all
that's
the
not good.
integration with the GameCube. You get Toadstool Tour or Advanced Tour, and then you can
Yeah,
port your characters over to the GameCube.
I don't know. And then people say, oh, it's a portable SNES, but I've always found it's just worse versions. Like Fusion's not as good as Super Metroid, and Super Circuit's not as good as Super Mario Kart, and I don't know. The library there just has not really stood the test of time for me in a lot of respects. And then last is Game Boy. I just have very little nostalgia for that. So my ranking is almost opposite of Justin's ranking. So there you go. That's mixed perspectives in the boardroom. We got a ton of other listener questions, but we're going to have to save those for a rainy day. And we have some news items that will hit some of the bigger ones next week. All you really need to know, though, is that Donkey Kong Land 1, 2, and 3 are on Switch Online now, and you can play them all. But for now, that is another episode of the Toadstool Boardroom in the books. We are a weekly Nintendo show here on Thursdays on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, which, by the way, our Spotify Wrapped stats, Chris, were awesome this year, if you want to talk about that for just a little bit.
Yes, real quick. So I will try to rapid fire through as many of these as I can. So I'm scrolling through right now. We gained 106% new listeners, 276% more streams, and
Nice.
139% more followers. I'm gonna call out some of the ones that I thought were
We gained a thousand
uh
percent more video views, and I think it's because we didn't do as much video last year, but I don't remember for sure.
well,
I
there
mean,
was a point where I
there was a long
stopped
stretch
doing
where there
them.
wasn't video.
Yeah, there
Yeah,
wasn't video. It
yeah,
was streamed. Oh, here's what it was. The top episode was the one you listened to while playing Echoes of Wisdom.
nice.
It was streamed 210% more than our average episode.
That's great. And then the stat you really loved was that we're in the top 10% of video podcasts on Spotify.
That was the one I was looking for. Yeah.
Yeah,
We were
which
streamed in
is fun.
34 countries as well, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
On purpose?
So
or-
thanks for the support, Boardroom. You guys are awesome. And yeah, we have a ton of awesome listeners, and we appreciate you all very much. And we're happy to see people posting in the Discord that we're a part of their Spotify Wrapped and their top 5 podcast. That's awesome. That's super rad. So thank you so much. But that's it for this week. I already started the wrap up, but I'll start it again. Thursdays, Apple Podcast, Spotify, video version on Spotify and over on YouTube, audio wherever else you like to listen to your show. Find the show on Twitter at ToadstoolBR, at Blue Sky at Toadstool Boardroom. Send us an email, toadstoolboardroom@gmail.com. Justin, where can people find you?
Find me on Blue Sky. You can also find me on Twitter, but I don't really post a whole lot there nowadays. KOREIS in either location. I've got a review in progress for Delta Force up on IGN.com. Hopefully, I'll have the final review up by the end of the week. So far, it is definitely a multiplayer online shooter.
Chris, where can people find you?
You can find me at Shrives93 all over the internet. I don't really. I'll retweet things on Twitter, but I don't really put anything net new on there anymore. At least I'm trying not to. I'm over on Blue Sky. You can, if you have any recommendations for games that are in the Steam sale, the autumn sale, because that's happening right now, send those my way. I have a few things in my cart, but I have not pulled the trigger on them. Do not buy Suicide Squad, as I learned last night.
Don't do it. You can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky, but pretty much also just Blue Sky at this point at Logan J. Plant. But for now, that's all the time I got. I got to get back to playing Animal Crossing New Leaf on my Nintendo 3DS. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time in the Toadstool Boardroom for our last show of 2024. Until then, enjoy the sweet tones of the new Toadstool Boardroom theme song. We'll see you next time.